Hey man, happy new,
Yeah, Happy New Year.
happy new year.
We'll be doing a little bit of ducking in and out because we've got Milo, our 2-year-old grandson.
Ah, wonderful.
Milo Mondays.
Feel free to introduce him.
Hmm,
That would be good. How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, cold.
Ah, good. I had to, yeah, it is cold. I just got back from Norway early this morning.
Hmm,
That was colder.
yeah, except that's a country that knows cold, understands cold.
Yeah, it was minus 10. So, but my brother's up in the mountains and there it was minus 17, I think it was.
Wow.
So yeah, his 2-year-old did not want to go playing outside.
I don't think I'd want to go playing outside.
And I got a new sweater. Ta-da!
That
I actually went with my mother to buy it at the factory, so that was a fun little
looks
adventure.
that looks extremely Norwegian.
Thank you, thank you. I will take that as a
Yeah, it's a
compliment.
compliment.
Yeah, it's a compliment. And we'll be seeing Janine today. She's coming over here.
Oh, cool.
She is home for
What
Christmas.
in this? Oh, right, in this country.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, sorry, my carpet was going a bit funny.
Hi.
Hello, Jonathan. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, well, maybe not exactly happy for many myriads of reasons in the world, but at least it's happy in this room at the moment right now.
Hmm.
So, Jonathan, I haven't really noticed. You got all kinds of cool things behind you. Do you mind doing a guided tour?
Yeah, so I think you've noticed because I've replaced the bulb on that one. This is just a lamp from a posh English lighting designer. I can't remember his name. But it's quite interesting because completely independently, I bought this item, which is a craft fair. This was about 10 years ago. And then you can't see it very clearly from there, but
Hey,
it's got
Peter.
colored tags sticking out of it.
Yeah,
Close tags. And then I realized that this is
really?
actually an analog version of that. And they're almost exactly the same size. It's weird. It shows how your subconscious works. And so I put them opposite each other so they can kind of chat about analog and digital.
Very cool,
And
Jonathan.
then much more recently I got that. You can get these cool posters and that they're actually colors of various different types of food. And so it's got a kind of whole color spectrum with things like, baked beans and so on. It's rather entertaining.
Very
From a
you.
distance, it's not so entertaining. It just looks like a bunch of colors, but there we go.
That's very
I
cool.
decided to go for I decided to use multicolored things as a theme in my home office. So I've got things like that, which is a executive toy someone bought me once they worked out I like this kind of thing. There
Ah,
we go.
very good. And hi, Peter, and hi for the first time in this session, in this not session, in this series of meeting,
Yeah.
Vincent. Good to see you again.
And you, Freda, how are you, sir?
I am actually very good. I got back from, I took my mother to Norway on Friday, and I came back this morning. And from the plane landing at Gatwick Airport, touchdown, to being in Wimbledon, exactly 1 hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The closest we get to a transporter system. Fantastic.
It was really lucky. No waiting on trains, no passport nonsense. So, yeah, it was good. So that's good. But, Jonathan, I have a question about the thing on your right, our left. Did you say it's clothing tags? No, I can't hear you, dude.
Yeah, little like plastic tags with little bars at the end, which you get, which you have to things you have to yank off after you buy something. And someone has some craft project. They've got lots of different colors of those and arranged in a grid, and it's exactly the same as that. It's uncanny actually. And I was
Keith,
not looking for it, and I did
yeah.
not even realize until
Well, there's
a
an
month later.
even deeper connection than that. Keith, do you remember the first future text, I think, at the Google place where Ilona Regulski from the British Library, excuse me, British Museum was?
Yep.
So she is in charge of Egyptian ancient writing, and she contends that the first ever recorded writing, oh, here's Mark. I'm going to say that again. Hey, Mark. Jonathan was just pointing out a really cool thing to our left, his right, on the wall. That it's an art piece, clothing tags. And I don't know if you remember, but Ilona from the British Museum, in the first Future of Text she pointed out that the first recorded kind of proper writing in that context was actually product tags about that size that was on products. So when you go to the shop and you see a little product tag, that is the oldest known writing, little bone or something, to say what something is so it could be sold.
Hmm.
The most mundane and coolest thing all at once, right? So
Well,
that,
presumably the tag would show a picture of the thing itself then, wouldn't it? Stylized
hmm.
in some
Well,
cases.
yeah, no, exactly. I don't know who's coming today, and we're changing tack a little bit today. Um, so what I said last week to those of you who were here was today we're going to talk more about units of knowledge and stuff. We will. But this month I have what I call the January project because I like cool names. All it means is primary dialogue for today and next Monday. That's all we have left, right? Oh, Astral is here. Hello, Astral. I hope you can hear me. I don't need to hear you unless you have something to say, but I hope you can hear me. I'm guessing that's a yes. Right. So, yeah, what we're going to do today and next Monday, and I'm so extremely. Oh, okay. Cool. I see your message there. Is this? We're going to talk about a very specific thing, and then through lots of dialogue, the kind of next steps have revealed themselves in trying to do this. And that's something that I think may probably be more interesting to you guys, well, to us as a community. So I think I'll wait another 2 minutes, see if anyone else joins, and then do a brief presentation, fly through things. Yeah, here's Peter, and then we'll go into all kinds of things. But
Good morning.
morning, Peter. Are you having brunch?
No, just finished.
Oh, okay. The other thing is because the Sloan project is now done, Deanie and I no longer have a half an hour meeting before this. So if you guys, you don't have to say today, but if you guys want to have a different day, for some people Mondays are bad, or if you wanted to start a half an hour earlier or whatever, these are things we can discuss now. Hi, Brandel. I was just mentioning briefly that now that Sloan is complete, we may change the timing for this. So if anyone has any preferences, start a bit earlier or later, or even a different day, we can do that now. So that's a thing. Right. So, okay. Um, well, Tom, we will stick to the schedule then. Good point. I saw what you wrote there. Okay, so here's the thing. We talked a little bit last time about objects of knowledge and so on. We will go into that today. But I have this thing that I've fancily called the January project, which is just a major theme for today and next Monday. That's it. Mark has spent significant time already thinking about these things because that's what he does, and I'm very grateful for that. But please just understand it's a guiding inspiration for today and next Monday. And then at the end of the brief presentation I'm going to give, there is an opening to where to go next. But before we jump into that stuff, anyone have any comments, questions, or horrible or interesting New Year's stories?
I I spent much of the break reading the Old Testament just because that's the kind of guy I am, and I came to a really interesting realization, or had a really interesting thought that I'm really curious what people think about, which is that the invention of writing is likely not to be the first instance of writing, but the first time there was something that was nothing other than writing, that people would use all kinds of physical artifacts, be they natural or built, to construct narratives out of. prior to the construction of writing. And the reason why the things that we see in early cuneiform and other forms of writing are clerical is because those are the only things that couldn't have been constructed as writing out of these other narrative things that you get out of looking at a pot or the location and orientation of a particular building or hut or a tree or rock, because those are writing. That's the way that people would generate meaning. And the only reason that writing needed you can't balance your books that way. You can't generate stories like that. And so what that means is that there would have been a transitional period where people it means two things. One, that there would have been a transitional period between people sort of weaning themselves off of those forms. Like I'm rereading Ong now to sort of get his take on it. And two, it means that it's yet another instance where commerce and accounting leads those things as practices in the same way that graphs started for balance of trade and other things like that. Because it's a different quantifiable kind of form of constructed expression that comes from money and power and then transfers into expression and emotion and interiority. Anyway, that's me. Sorry, I just wanted to throw it out there because I was so excited by it.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited by that too, because until you have a need for this kind of stuff, it's not going to happen, obviously. And obviously, once you have something new, I mean, McLuhan's media tetrad relates to this. What the new medium displaces, replaces, emphasizes, all of that good stuff. So I think it is so wonderful for you to say that today, Brandel. It makes me even more excited about today because that's where we are now with XR. And we don't know yet, I think, what communicating in XR actually means. But I think we are battling our way to getting a little bit closer to what it is. So on that note, I'll do the brief presentation. And Jimmy, very happy to see you. We're going to do a brief presentation now on what today and next Monday is and highlighting what's coming up later. So that's all that we've done so far. Oh, I've got text messages. So exciting. But it's quiet. Right. Hang on. You guys, I love you dearly, but you are covering the screen. 1 second. Okay. I can only see Brandel now, one person randomly. So if you have any questions or something, just speak them or comment or whatever, right? So the January project, because I love cool names, a single letter as a XR as a live brief and space next steps. I'll tell you what that means. But the first thing is this. So because of Vint being wonderful as he always is, there's someone in a powerful position within the kind of stuff we do whom I have been invited to just be introduced to, which normally would just be my thing and who cares and whatever. But I did realize that I probably should be sending the letter to this person talking about the work we do also in XR. Should be viewable in XR as well as other means. Therefore, I am so incredibly grateful to have the dialogue of you guys to see what that might be. So in terms of the language used, I'm now using the term framed digital for traditional devices. Barbara Tversky has been wonderful via email back and forth. She's written book-length emails on these things on, you know, what does this mean? What does that mean? And she has such great experience in XR. So the reason I use the term framed digital is that everything is potentially spatial. It's just that some of it we see through a frame. You know, we can have a 3D game, of course, but it's still through a frame. So that's why we use that terminology. So the aim of the letter to this person is that that person should feel that working in XR can be something great, basically. And if we're going to build that, it has to be built on open, shareable, rich, and robust metadata. So the constraints, there are a few. This is not everything in the world. I've added and/or sidecar here because I don't want the actual data formats to bog us down for this. That's something we need to focus separately, properly. So for those of you who don't know Visual Meta, it's just a way of taking something like BibTeX, putting it in the back of the document, so it can be parsed out. For example, this is the title, author, year, and so on of a book. It's that simple. It's not voodoo. So we are going to be using that now, because the notion is I send this letter as a PDF, and I say at the back of the PDF, by the way, if you open this PDF in Reader on Vision, which is unlikely the person will do, but we should have a recorded version of it, it will have extra stuff. So that also means this is only to be a native Vision OS experience. Really, for reading, we need to put something in there so it can be read. And also AR. The reason for that is simply that the way Reader has been implemented is in space, in real space. I cannot put a fake VR room around it as it is right now. And we're only going to do text, just to keep within. This is only for today and next week. Run through these things should be relatively clear and obvious and happy for everyone, but the knowledge objects should at least be citations and defined concepts or glossary. These are the things that the system should be able to know about. It should know about headings, the full text should be there, and of course, sculptures, meaning data in space, and separately also annotations by the recipient user. If someone's going to be augmented reading a letter, probably they want to be able to do something with that letter, say this is horrible or this is useful or whatever, right? And of course, the element of full citation information for the document itself will be there, but that doesn't impact our experience. So the authoring scenario is mostly writing on a Mac, going into XR, doing spatial stuff, copying the spatial coordinates, putting it back in the document, and going in and out. Does that make sense to everyone, or is that weird? It's basically saving the 3D scene, sticking it in the document so it can be reconstituted. Okay, cool. So we're going to look briefly at two things, reading a single letter or reading a volume in a volume. So the reading scenario is, as I think you've seen, it's the PDF in a 2-page spread in Reader on Apple Vision Pro. It's beautiful. The user can move it around, scale it, that kind of stuff. So the question is, they should be able to do things from a context menu, and the context menu for Vision OS is quite horrible now. It's really, really small, even though there's more space on the page. But these are just the things they are. It's an early OS, so it's, it's the way it is. It's fine. Not a lot of interaction are implemented, so that's something for us to think about. What should they be able to do? Here is the letter. I don't expect you to read it now, but you can have a link to it. It's also on this schedule. It's really basic, headings, citations, headings, citations. That's it. There's nothing fancy here. So we need to talk about, please, if you don't mind, the default will be this 2-page spread, but then what? What kind of other views might be useful? Also, what interactions do we want to enable? And what should the reader be able to create with this? Spatial annotations, highlights, what? And so on. This is something to go back to. But when it comes to interactions, I've done experiments, and Brendel suggested a long time ago that I just put images in photos in the headset and play with them. So here is just an image of the 2-page spreads made into one. It's okay. When you're actually in the space, the things on the side are not that readable, and you don't have anything central. If you make it a vertical column, it's also not that human-oriented, but it's worth experimenting with. And we can do things like adding navigation top and bottom, or whatever we might. And of course, for the writing bit, there's nothing wrong with having a keyboard in space. If we talk about doing something spatialized, each section could be its own card, so to speak. But until that has real value, I think we in the community have agreed that's kind of a gimmick at this stage, but something to look at. So what we're looking at then is a little bit of the spatial data or sculptures. And in that, if we look at the actions the user should be able to use while reading this, skimming to navigate, that deals with the headings. Look up terms, online or glossary, that's dealing with the full text of the defined concept. I think this is obvious, no point me reading this to you. So here's the thing that struck me on the flight from Bergen to London this morning. The document is only as useful as the environment it is opened into allows. And of course, the environment is only as useful as the document enables. I think this is really, really important leading to our future discussions, at least I hope so. So going from reading a single letter to reading a volume in a volume, what struck me is reading from the beginning of time on a kind of a rectangle is actually quite good. The magic of XR is the environment, not just the document. So let's say that for the sake of argument, this thing that looks like a PDF can be overlaid the reader's physical desk in front of them so they can lean forward and read it and point and do all that. That's not rocket science, right? But then the second thing, and I think this is what's more exciting, and I really want to hear what you guys have to say. Imagine this is the ultimate office, so to speak. The room is filled with their information and actions, which can help them really get this document. So then we can ask fun questions like, if the whole space is the recipient's office, what might it contain and what should it be able to do? What information should be there? What views should be available? And so we can start mapping things out relative to what we did earlier by adding recipient space has maybe 3D models of relevance, maybe different frames like Fabienne worked on, maybe LLM analysis and so on, right? Here are some early things we did in the community. It's literally the simplest we possibly could have, but I'm putting it back up here as a little bit of a thinking jolt. And then we can also look at notions of the table having the letter on it, but you should be able to tear things off the letter and put it somewhere else on the table. That's probably useful, even though it's quite 2D. We can have different tools. If you're dealing with some kind of a science stuff, you can have 3D models related to it. The Earth can be there as a map. Bottom right-hand corner, the reason for apparel is what we talked about with different tasks require different tools. Maybe you put on different gloves or different glasses. Fun things to help people deal with this relatively normal letter in the middle. So this was the sketch earlier today. Very, very badly drawn, but if you imagine something like the previous page, where in front of you, you have a huge library. On the right, maybe you have portraits of people. You have your main knowledge map somewhere else in the room. Maybe there's a knowledge map related to this. Different tools, maybe even a Rolodex, geographical map, all these things. And then you have this virtual stack of paper, which you can move around and tear up. So I'd like us to go back to talk about the document, but looking into the future, I really feel, and if you disagree with me, please do tell me, in XR, it's not about the ultimate document, it's about the ultimate workspace. The ultimate document should be robust and contain all the information, but because we want to be able to change the views, it's the workspace. So thank you for listening to all this. So what we'll talk about now, we'll talk in general, of course, but specifically ideas for one letter, and then we can talk about the full environment in XR. And I saw there were some comments. Oh, Rob, you're here. Excellent. And just saw a message from Ken. He can't make it today, but that's fair enough. Yeah, Rob, we're talking about volumes as well, so I'm glad you're here since you used that language. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
Mostly that we read letters for action, and so being in an environment that's posed to allow us to do stuff is probably my main goal. The one thing that I do with letters and other communications, not yours, obviously, but when they're very poorly written, I need to tear them apart and use things like visual syntactic text formatting in order to intuit the author's meaning, because I find it hard to parse run-ons. So that's something that I would probably want in an environment if it turned out that it was hard to kind of get at an author's intent through the length of a communication.
Brandel, that's fantastically important and interesting. Do you mind getting the paper on that to share with the group?
Yeah, sure.
I found out about that at the time when I was doing the original kind of layout stuff. What it is, guys, if you don't know about it, instead of having a chunk of text, it breaks it by period, comma, and does all that stuff to make it more readable. That is very, very important. We'll get to your point, Mark, but that you wrote down because it's super important. But Jonathan, please. Jonathan with sound, please. With sound as an added bonus.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
Yeah, related to what Brandel just said, one of the things I scribbled down when you sent the email, Brand, was this is a thing I'm quite big on, that a document from a distance is not useful to see at all. And this is obviously why you have files with file names underneath, which are typically the title, but not that. So I was going to suggest, now this may not be practical literally from from the standpoint of what you're trying to do right now, but I think documents when zoomed out should show in some way a summary, and when they're zoomed right out, the summary should be the title or a title. So it's showing you the most usable information that can be fitted into that can be legible at a particular distance. Now, from a practical point of view, from what you're doing, I mean, if you think that's a relevant thing, you could just fake that, obviously, by putting a title suitably big so that you can see it at a distance, and then your headings, slightly unusually large, but again designed so that you can see them at an intermediate distance, and maybe levels of that. That would apply to a letter just as well as to a volume, if you want to make that point.
I think that's really, really important, and this is one of the things that Mark and I tend to argue about in a good way. To be clear, for instance, if you have citations in a document, you should be able to, I think, access the source of those as quickly and effortlessly as possible. And the question is, what does that mean, right? One of the things is, if the paper has an abstract, if you look at the citation in your document, you should probably be able to see the abstract immediately as well. But then abstracts aren't necessarily always good. So maybe you should be able to have your own prompt for an LLM that you trust have generated that, or maybe a colleague or whatever. So an automatic decision of what should be shown at different scales is really, really hard. It's also really, really important. So absolutely. I cannot implement that in Reader because the open dialog box is owned by Apple, and it won't allow me to directly open other things now. And again, that's fine. It's like the first iPhone. There's a lot of things missing. But that's
It could be just for the author of the document to supply that, just like supplying a title. At least there's no law saying that it has to be automatic. It could be, you could supply, a couple of levels of zooming, of summary, whatever you want at different zoom levels.
Oh yeah, and it's so ridiculously important. And I see Keith is saying in some cases the most useful info at a distance is an icon. Absolutely. So that's something I'm trying to redo in Author, by the way. If I write a paper, if I write a note, when I'm in the Finder, they shouldn't look the same at a basic thing. But also, in this community, we are all very, very different people. I would absolutely love to subscribe to people's annotations. So for instance, my documents, top right-hand corner icons, if Peter liked them, they can have a Peter star. That would be useful to me. Like this is something that somebody I respect in the field has said is a good document. That helps the iconic choice of how to deal with that paper. Because as Brandel says, it's all about action, right? That's why the annotations and sharing is so important. So that was quite brilliant. Astro, please.
Hello. So I'm thinking, so if we're looking at this from the perspective of what a workspace should be, I think the the key, I guess, potential of this technology would be to create a linked workspace. So perhaps the letter might be a linked letter to like other volumes, so that we can. So knowledge would be, I think, consensus is a big part of that, and I'm thinking of like convenience paths that you might see through grass. So you can create like links between like one part to another part in spatial, like what volume links to another one in space, or like just by like gauging what people looked at and then maybe what people looked at afterwards, and collect those insights. And then maybe you can take those insights and like maybe collate them. And that's what the meta workspace looks like. Would be not just your desk, but like how the elements on your desks links to other people's insights. I'm just imagining just like books with like strands linking them together. And then you open up the pages and you see like individual citations linking to other things that people have thought about or written. I think the social element's the crucial part here.
Yeah, yeah. I just wrote a sentence. Right. So absolutely, because in academia and science, a statement without a citation is an assumption, right? To an extent, I'm being a little bit over the top, but the point is, this is supposed to be connected knowledge. So how we do that, and to use the terminology you used, is much better than only sticking with citations as the way to do that, or only sticking with this. There should be multiple ways for people to thread things and to share things. When it comes into the semi-automatic, looking at how people have dealt with it, you get into issues, of course, of privacy and sharing and so on. But as Peter has pointed out, there's nothing wrong with the system spying on us, provided it's for our own sake privately. And we can then choose to share that. And that's where we have the old technology of RSS feeds as one mechanism to be able to, oh, hello, Keith, you got the future in there. Does he want to say briefly hello?
Well,
Maybe next meeting.
It's 12 o'clock.
Hello. It's 12 o'clock.
Another thought I had, that a system might shuffle documents. So to determine like leads, concrete leads and connections between things. Something leading back to what was said earlier, like the position of data in sometimes in spatial space, I guess, can assign like maybe unintended meanings. And being smart about that would be good to consider. Yeah, I really like that insight.
Oh, absolutely. This is so important, and this is the next step that I think we should take together, and that is last year and the year before, we really focused on a seated position because it was academics who were our primary audience. They don't have VR rooms, and kind of on a swivel chair. So you were sitting in a dome. But once you get off your chair, XR becomes something different. So the things you're talking about now, about putting things in space when you can actually walk freely because either you're in AR or you're in mapped VR, is a whole different medium. I'll give you a weird analogy and see if you vibe with this, so to speak. The other day, someone I knew quite well for a number of years gave me a hug. And that was a surprise because I then felt that person, right? Somebody I knew like this. And I realized that feeling that presence of that person is quite similar to the difference between seeing your information and walking in your information. It really struck me as having a strong analogy. So when we look at the environment that we should discuss together in the future of knowledge, having your own elements, having subscribed elements, sharing elements, putting it over there, well, why isn't it here? It's wonderful. So I'm really grateful you brought that up. The little demo, I don't know who was here, but when I showed author with a map with way too many things, the fact that I remembered Doug was there and somebody was there, that's kind of amazing. So thank you. And Peter.
Okay. I was thinking that the letter itself should have some very short mnemonic identifier so that if we had it in a shared information space. I could tell Mark, go take a look at Laughing Finch. And he'd remember the name Laughing Finch because it's an unusual combination of terms, type that into his system, and that would allow him to open the space in his headset or otherwise interact with it. I also think that the letter should be both a mailbox and also an email sender. So that instead of my having to copy something out of the interface, I could just simply select a citation and have the letter mail it to me at some other address, maybe blue tablecloth, and that would exchange the metadata between different data objects within the space. When I'm selecting something, there should be some sort of contextual menu that can pop up. So there might be, ask Rock about it, email it to, followed by three or four of the people who I'd be most likely to mail it to based upon general context. Um, Give me a concordance of terms that appear in this letter. I really love concordance-based interfaces. I find them incredibly useful, especially when you're having a large number of data objects that you're playing with.
Peter, could you put up links about concordance-based interfaces? I think that would be very useful, and thank you.
Okay, I can track something now, send it to you.
Yeah, fantastic. Anybody have any comments on that particular aspect? Then we've got Tom.
So I want to challenge people to really strip back on what exactly a letter is. What is this limitations? When I send you a letter, I am composing it to what I think you think is going to be most important or relevant to your understanding of whatever I'm trying to communicate. Let's just say a cover letter for a job, for instance. I'm trying to communicate in the most effective way possible who I am or what I can do. That it's not a very effective way of doing that, as those of us who've sent out lots of cover letters into dead silence. And of course, these days, we also have the problem that, AI is reading all the cover letters and it doesn't have the context at all and any sort of connection to the possible human on the other side. So, a letter is just one tool for communicating meaning. A poster is another. What we're doing right now is another. All have their limitations. So is there a way that XR can bridge those limitations in such a way that I more effectively communicate the meaning of what I'm trying to express in a way that's relevant to you specifically? Because I don't, if I know you well, then I have a better idea of how to pitch that letter because I know Frodo is going to be into this sort of thing. So I'm going to say, you should read this article because it's very much along the lines of what you're working on. But if I don't know you well, that's a completely, then you're faced with a tool that has some severe limitations in terms of I have to guess what your meaning is. So is there a way we can bridge that gap of meaning that letters introduce into our communication mechanism that's different from the way it's been done for the last 2,000 years or 3,000 years using XR? Does that give us a new set of tools to achieve something there? I think that really is the way we need to be thinking about this because otherwise we're just sort of putting lipstick on a pig in a sense. We're trying to make a medium.
No lipstick neither.
But you get the point is that there's we're trying to fix a medium which may be inherently broken and maybe we need to question the fact the media of the letter itself as a concept. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and in a very respectfully, in this particular context, utterly irrelevant. I see you laughing, so I'm glad you get my humor. What I mean is what Astral was talking about earlier, how we thread things together, how we connect knowledge is really key. And I think, Tom, at least being able to define stuff, make our own knowledge graphs or glossaries or whatever the heck it might be, and to be able to have that communicate with someone else's was probably a good idea. Mark and I talked to Chris Gutteridge about this many, many years ago about you should be able to read at different levels. So the author should be able to say, here's a ton of stuff about me, and the reader should be able to say, here's a ton of stuff about me, and the system should be able to figure out what should be highlighted first, for instance. So it's a really massive topic. How it relates to XR yet, I don't know, but we should think. Yeah, Mark.
I was just thinking, hearing you sort of say earlier about the fact that, so you might, for instance, look for an abstract, but maybe the abstract isn't there, or it might be not well written, is maybe to move back from using some of this terminology, which itself is a constraint imposed by the legacy tech of print. And for this sort of XR digitally born text we have now, say, okay, so what do we really mean by that? So probably the abstract, in a more general sense, is a synopsis of some form. So it's a short description of what it is. And if you think of it in those terms, then you don't necessarily have to take an abstract, or your system might find something so that's an abstract, but it's too short, or I can't handle it in some way, but I can find essentially a synopsis from somewhere else. So I think stepping back from some of the acquired terminology, which comes freighted with meaning that isn't perhaps useful in the thing, might actually help you in this. Because I did some experiments over Christmas in terms of looking at sort of what is the second order impact of just bringing the references, and even on a paper with, say, about 25 references, you're up at over 1,000 secondary references. And just now I asked various types of AI, can you tell me how many references there are in this book? It's actually an open access book. And the best it could do is say, well, I can tell you that they start on this page and they run to that page. There are, in fact, 505. And another interesting thing about that is, if somebody referenced this, do you actually really need all 505 references? Because, in fact, this is a compendium of academic papers on visualization. So there is this thing, again, about thinking about what we really want when we ask for this secondary information. The danger is, if we follow it down a sort of code logic basis, it becomes very hard-edged, and you get what the system tells you. So if you say, I want all the references for everything in this paper, one of them is going to come with, I think this is 508 references, which I had to count by hand for the analysis. And that's just something to bear in mind, because you showed us last week, I think it was, what you described, as a visually complex visual array, three-dimensional array in AR. And so it's very, very quickly, if you have all the secondary information, it's very easy to get massively overloaded. So I just throw those things up there in the sense of, we want to hold on to the fact that often less is more.
Less is more is really an important principle, because you need to be able to hide stuff in a manner that you can bring it back. But there's also the opposite of that, Mark, and that is, backlinks. What other papers cite the paper you're looking at, which is at least as important. So then you get into that whole kettle of fish of how to even find that out. But it is a very, very important thing that we need to figure out. If academic institutions are to thrive, I really think that being able to point to stuff, cite it, references, link to it, whatever you want to call it, has to be easy and robust, right? So this paper that I'm looking at now, and in the introduction paragraph, it points out a lot of people don't read the citations when they cite them. A lot of people don't follow them. There are all these issues. These are really, really fundamental, but they cannot be only to well-published work. It needs to be connecting all our knowledge. So as far as our work is concerned, that is a huge issue. Now, also the thing with connecting and linking, I see many comments here, but as you know, I've been experimenting with music as well. And there was a very specifically interesting, relevant thing that came up a few days ago, and that is I tried to do a spoken word summary of our meetings. And I tried all kinds of artificial voices, and they all sound artificial. It was awful. The notion is that, let's say one of us misses a meeting, we actually care about that meeting, listen to it in the car or whatever the heck as a podcast, right? Really bad. So then I did the music thing again, and I asked various systems to produce like a spoken word thing. And I said, you don't need to be too literal, but get the information in there. It was much, much, much better. Right. And that goes back to some of the very beginnings of before literature, the Odyssey and all these things that were handed down through us through generation. It was through rhyme and meter and all that stuff. And I've had people suggest different things. I'm mentioning that for two reasons. One, itself, but also Astral's discussions of connections. Let's say one of you were to listen to one of these things, and there was a spoken poetry bit about the last meeting that you found inspirational. You should be able to cite that little bit of music too, right? So high resolution addressability should not only be for written text, it should be for other media as well. Of course, we can link inside a YouTube video, but that's linking to a big company. It doesn't necessarily draw it to us. So I just found that another layer of connecting stuff. But there's so many wonderful things in the chat, but I'm going to ask you guys, considering today and Monday, next Monday, it's two-page spreads, looks like a PDF, can be interactive. We all agree that that's really not ideal, but I'm sending this to someone important. If they actually bother download my software and open it, what can we do to give them a sense of, oh, there's something special here? Should we have like a lot of it can be fake. Should we have like a fake library in the background, or should we have, by fake, I mean illustrative, to show what the future can bring? Or should we have a cool visualization, or etc.?
Yeah, one of the things that Rob mentioned is a globe having relevance to location data. One of the things that's abundantly clear reading, as I said, the Old Testament, is that there are things that rightly should be family trees. There's things that should be timelines. There should things that should be chronological sort of progressions through things, maps with dates associated with them, and you can either annotate a single thing with the times, or you can have that sort of thing progress. So I think it also depends on the content. You did link the Dropbox. Is the in the slideshow, but I was just looking to see if it's in the email that you sent a couple of days ago, but I think I don't have that yet. So I mean, I think that it would highly depend on, like, the presence of a globe would be a distraction in an email absent any geospatial data that's relevant. So I think that I'll sort of try to skim that in order to think about what are the single most important things. Because like I said, for action or for understanding things, like having a calendar, it's a good thing in order to look at the past chronology, in order to plan future chronology. Geospatial stuff is good on maps, and the scale should be proportional to the sort of the size of the reference thing. So you don't want to look at a map of the entire globe if you're talking about getting from Ipswich to Guildford. So those things, but I'll go through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandel. I'm going to immediately address what Mark said up here about the two-page spread. It doesn't have to be a two-page spread. What I mean by that is roughly this size of stuff, so you don't move your head too much. Whether it's a single column or two-page, or even 3 columns, I have no preference for. And I'm sure we will all have slightly different preferences. And yeah, I mean,
I just suggest you actually put that somewhere up front, because that was I think that better articulates what you're saying something than a 2-page spread, which innately references a book. And we're not doing a book, we're doing a letter in Excel space. I think you just might find that would help with the whole process.
I think that's doubly interesting, Mark, because you're highlighting the fact that a letter is rarely bound. It's sheet by sheet in the analog world, so it doesn't actually have 2-page spreads anyway. Thank you. Okay, a couple of questions. Number one, who here subscribes to my feed for these meetings, for your calendar, the iCal feed? Oh, excellent. I have 2 hands. Because when Brandel is talking about time-based, time is an incredible navigation aid in so many ways. And of course, it has many, many problems in terms of strictness and softness and all of that stuff. But it is really, really nice. Every week when we have something coming up, I go to the next meeting and I write in the iCal what it is. And my son, who's 8, most of you know him, the school doesn't have an easy iCal for his class, which boggles my mind, right? There's so many things that can be easily done there. And Brandel, to integrate when you're reading and writing with your calendar, this seems to be a very, very potentially powerful thing, 100%. But I think all of you know, actually I'll show really briefly, because it goes to the next point. Hang on a second. I'll just show this. You can see, right? So here is the document, and as you know, if you double click on any of the citations, they come up. They are going to now come up with the abstract as well. As you can see there, we're starting experimenting with that. But the tool that I built a long time ago called Reader. Oh, there's a weird issue there. Hang on, let me just go to author. If you select any text, like I'm going to do Microsoft, and that's not what I meant. Right, did you see what I did? So what I did was I selected the word Microsoft, did a keyboard shortcut, command space, command space. It lifts it into this little dialog here, which is called Liquid, which I haven't used the name very well because, of course, Apple's new interface is called Liquid. Then I can go references R, Wikipedia W, for instance, and there it is. So it allows interactivity to be on anything. Search images XR. Okay, that's not very relevant to us. But the point of showing you this is it's an interactive mechanism that works on anything. So maybe even for this letter, we should try to do something powerful like that. But how is that spatial, right? Yeah, Mark.
A thought as you were saying that was interesting. I was just thinking that actually the mind runs far faster than the fingers or the voice. So when you're looking at something, your ability, a human's ability to actually make a very multifaceted traversal across the thing you're looking at, isn't something I think that encodes easily. And I find myself thinking of reading, was it Dreaming in Code, about the sort of the Chandler app that never arrived, and because what they were doing was writing a new organizer, and the underlying problem was that what they were trying to build was something that humans actually navigated quite well, but was incredibly hard to build within the hard-edged structure of coding, because our sort of thought process and our associations just don't flow in those linear ways. I don't mean that as a negative observation. I just think it's an interesting challenge.
Yeah. In terms of the fingers, though, and the mind, I don't know if that applies to everything. Like, this is what Randall talked about earlier, a subset of it. You select text and it shows it to you in a different way. Keyboard shortcuts are incredibly powerful. For those of us who like to use them. Not everybody does, but they can be, like typing. Astral, please. Yeah.
So this might have more of a case for the VR aspect of it, but maybe giving them the environment, changing the context for the document may be useful here. I don't know if reading it in a tree versus reading on top of a waterfall might change, or in the middle of a city might change someone's context. Maybe thinking along those lines, offering them a similar document within a different environment, and then somehow demonstrating that they get a different takeaway. Again, this is hard for just like one person, right? You'd have to like pull multiple people to really get people to grasp this.
I think that's really, really important, actually. And let me show you while we talk. Please continue. I'm going to open the document and try to just do that. because that's part of the brilliance of the devices. Let me.
Maybe you can share the same document with like other people's workspaces, just to show like other people's different links, and in a way that might frame the document in different ways.
So here's the document in XR. And now I'm in, I think it's somewhere outside of Oslo in Norway. And it's dark and moody. Absolutely changes the feel of reading it. And here it is in my cluttered office.
Mm-hmm.
So I strongly agree with that. Even the purely visual side of things. Because, hey, let's go to Bora Bora. Then let's not have darkness. Let's have light. We're on holiday now. And in many ways, I think it's fair to say this is now a different document. Because the reading.
And it ascribes meaning to the location, and the location also ascribes meaning to the text.
Yeah. And here we can now read it a bit longer. So this is the basic stuff that already, try to do it like this, already exists. And it's not very spatial, but it most certainly is environmental.
Like you could show like empathetic links, like you could see like maybe an image of like where specific writers wrote a piece from, maybe. If you had like a letter that had a bunch of voices that may have like specific perspectives, and they could also be like potentially like physical and like metaverse locations, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. Yes.
Hard to put together in a week, but I think just think along the lines of like how the environment affects like just the emotional is important.
Yeah. I mean, look at these horrible citations at the end. They're dead.
I mean, are they dead? I mean, they still work even if the internet isn't working, because you can take that text and you can do something meaningful with it. So I'd be cautious about using something quite so judgmental as dead.
No, sorry,
because
Mark.
I think it creates a wrong sort of description. I mean, I know entirely what you mean. The fact is you can't do more digitally with them in the moment, but I'd cautious as to using a term as strong as dead.
Oh yeah, I used the term frozen. And I used to think that was a bad thing, but of course you want your text to be frozen for the future, but you want to be able to do stuff with it as well. So, yeah. Rob, you had a comment way up actually that I think is very relevant to this. You were talking about the one that starts, for me, the environment is far more important. Would you mind speaking that, please?
Okay, I thought maybe it was a little off topic, but when you said that making the office the office the center of it rather than the document, I don't find reading documents in VR at all interesting. First of all, it takes too long to boot up. It's clumsy, it's heavy, and it's limited in what you can do in it so far. I hardly ever touch it. So, but then I was thinking, yeah, if I had a globe that was actually zoomable, it's like unlike a real globe, physical globe, even just having Google Earth available sitting on the desk where I can reach over and spin it and zoom in, or having the other tools that I use a lot. I write a lot of emails and texts, and I look up things in Wikipedia and other places. So I could spend some time thinking about what I would want in my office in VR that would be different from the office I'm sitting in.
Yeah, I think that will be very interesting, Rob, going down the line. I think we should, because we've had a lot of discussions in the beginning, long time ago, PDF versus HTML, blah, blah, blah. And I think we all agree that as long as much data as the author wants to have in there as possible, who gives a monkeys, as long as when you open it, you can do what you want with it, to put it in a simple way. And that means that the entire space comes into play, just like you're saying, Rob. So thank you. Astral, please.
So I guess not necessarily the place, but like what if like you opened up a book and like a traffic cone appeared in your room next to you? And suddenly you realize that the context of this might have to do with like road work or like a caution indicator, that this is something important that you could ascribe to the text that is linked towards real world connections.
I really, really like that. That goes back to something particularly we discussed at the beginning of this project with Fabian and Adam, where we wanted to have the author be able to be there. So if you're reading a book in a traditional form, if you say something like, what's this all about? The author will appear as a 3D avatar, point and talk to you. You're extending that iconically, which I think is really, really good. So it's an icon, we talked about small, but also big. I mean, I would love to, I'm maybe a bit of a theatrical guy, but if this PDF style thing was opened by this recipient, and I could appear behind it, recorded like we can be in the Vision Pro, saying, you really have to pay attention to this particular bit right here, and you need to support what we're doing. You know, that could be fun.
I've been thinking about like how to get people to grapple with like climate emergency stuff. And it feels like that like the missing connection is like empathy to the environment that you really just don't get in a text page. So maybe the document could also just be about different climate emergencies, maybe that we need to be acting on, and like actually maybe just putting like elements of like, I don't know, like a rising tide indicator, maybe, I don't know, something to give them context, maybe like a sense of like, I don't know, like when you're like in an environment and you like see a snake there, right? You have an immediate gut reaction. Like these things can be manipulative, but they can also be like good indicators if we use them appropriately. Like advertising uses this against us, but there are ways that I think we can use this for social good too.
I think that's really, really strong. And one of the things we've been looking at, some of us, is the Apple Knowledge Navigator video from way back when. One of the things they did show there was deforestation of South America. And to be able to have visualization means available instantly to really help bring these points home is probably not a bad idea. So to have a globe in the environment, but maybe a globe that already has ready-made, it can accept different kind of data to show different kinds of things. That's really interesting. Thank you. Jonathan Brandel, and then Vincent, if you don't mind speaking what you wrote, that would be great.
Okay, shall I start? So trying to be brief here. So relating to the stuff I've been working on for quite a long time, it's easy to think that a document that one is sent is a kind of passive thing, and it's the onus is on the sender to supply information and so on to go with it, or footnotes or citations and so on. And I think that's kind of misleading. I'll just get over this bit very quickly, but it's like what you, the receiver, by merely opening a document and looking at it, there's some purpose attached to what you're doing. You know, you're reading it for a purpose, and what you will do and what you want to see or do with the document completely depends on you and what you're about. For instance, if you sent me a recipe as a document, I might well want to, obviously, if the computer allowed it, order some of the ingredients in the recipe and so on Amazon or from some shop. My point being, the document, various people like Brandel and Astral have talked about things like different views, objects you can have in your workspace, you know, globe and so on in the workspace. This is all true, but what those come from are different purposes that you will be using different parts of the document for. and even things like summaries and citations and definitions of Microsoft that Freddie, you showed us, and so on. Those will just particular purposes, which the what's the word? Can't think of the word. Anyway, but certain facilities or features that the document will provide. Let's try to be very quick about this. For instance, if you sent me a very short letter or a very short email, you don't normally have any need to do anything to be provided with anything extra. You can just read it and assimilate it and do whatever you want with that information. But it's when you have somewhat longer documents that you start to need things like summaries, but often non-textual things provided by the documents. And those are actions for the reader to take, obviously, but perhaps need to be provided by the sender. So the kind of things I have in mind, even for the letter you're talking about, is not merely just the things you might want to do with it as a reader, and not just have a summary, but you might be saying, you know, what's this about? I mean, what's the purpose of this document? You know, why did they send this? So that's, I mean, in simple cases, you can regard these as just kind of queries you do on the document. So you could have an LLM or something, or the author of the document answering these questions, all kinds of different questions someone might have about the document, which are one type of things you might want to do with it. For instance, yeah, what is the purpose of this document? What did this person want? Who are they? If there's mention of, if the document is in some way heavily time-based, maybe it's some kind of schedule, then you might want a diagram of it. As Brandon was saying, there are different, very different types of content. I just regard this as a very general different types of query or action even that you want to do with a document, which go beyond, in general, go beyond text. They might involve graphics, they might involve external operations, like, as I said, ordering something online or something like that. So relating this to the case in hand and what might be practical to do, the kind of thing I would suggest, and again, making use of XR, would be to have your document and have around it, if this is easily done, many different things that you might want to do with it in the wider sense. And one might be tell me what this person is trying to achieve. Tell me what this document is about. And the answer is they're asking for something. Tell me the goal of it. Tell me. I mean, I'd have to see a document that kind of come up with some of these, but in effect, you just be listing lots of different things you want to do with it spatially. And when you click on one to make best use of the space, it could put that, in some spare space outside it. So this is beginning to sound a bit like fundamentally a mind map in which the document is at the center. But I mean, logically, it's not that. And I think it would be important to make it clear that it's not just that. It's not just a bunch of a document with other documents and other documents off it, because in some cases it's not like that. But certainly things like summaries and Wikipedia-like definitions, which seem like hyperlinks, would be among the things that would be shown.
Absolutely.
But whether it's practical for you to, well, yeah, well, if you thought this was an attractive idea, maybe there could be some brainstorming of some non-obvious, non-hyperlink-like things that could be put around the document. But I don't think of this as being purely pointed to a word or a phrase in the document which is highlighted in some way, click, and then out comes something. I think of this as a more global thing. Some of them could be individual, but something could be global. And in the wider sense, it'll be things that you obviously can't do right now, like reply to this document.
Jonathan, let me show you what we can do.
That was rather a long spiel.
Yeah, no, it was long, and it was very useful. I'll show you all briefly what you can do now, because it relates to that. So when you have your export dialog here, so let's decide we want to have we click here, AI suggests, and of course you can do it manually if you want to, but it analyzes the document to give you an abstract, keywords, concepts, and names. So the keywords, concepts, and names go in the metadata, wherever they happen to be stored. The abstract goes on the front page. So let's say, for the sake of argument, you read it, you can just delete this little thing here made by AI if you fully, if you're happy with it. Export it. When you do that to the desktop, this is how it appears. Right, and I actually find that really, really useful. I'm not sure if it's necessary. It's related to our earlier discussion on what we do about summaries and stuff, but also we have started playing with tagging. These are the Finder tags, but it's for the document itself, not for the exported stuff. So it's absolutely, totally fine to have discussions around what other stuff to put in the document for XR reading. So yeah, it makes sense.
But just to, it's quite hard to be clear about this without me giving confecting examples, but text is so general that it's tempting to think that any analysis you do or any function you do on text produces more text, like takes you to another document or a summary or something that, like you generated just now. But that is only a very special case, and documents themselves are a very special case. And I think if possible, it would be nice to emphasize other things, such as diagrams, but that they are themselves only a special case, like timelines or something like that, to show that you can do very different things with your document in XR. And talking, even more, more general cases of things like, could be anything, could be like, if you're in an XR world, it might mention a location in the world, in the XR world, or something like go here or simulate this or anything like that. So it becomes fully general. But I'm not proposing that. But right. I'm just thinking maybe to summarize what I'm saying in for what you can do now, it might be an idea to think of really interesting, strikingly different pre-composed actions you might want to do to the document and actually show them spatially. And some of them might be some kind of diagram or something about the document. And then that would show this is not just some kind of fancy hypertext thing, because I think it could be a lot more than that.
Yeah, thank you. Brandel, I think you're on fire over there.
So I keep trying to come back myself, anchoring this to this is a document, but this document is a document that is a letter. And for a letter, there are certain sort of implications. One is that I think one generally intends the recipient to read the letter in full and in sequence. So it's not necessarily the same as a Wikipedia article, which is really not there to be read in full, or indeed all of Wikipedia is not there to be read in full. You don't read it start to finish. It's a communication, so there's a temporality to it as well. So there's this sort of there's the expectation somebody reads it start to finish. But depending on the size of it, the clarity of what the constituent parts are and what they do to and for each other isn't necessarily clear. So something that what I did in the what a prototype's prototype, the 2D, not the 3D version, was I construct a scaffold on which to put the details of the sections as they come in. So there's if you remember, what a prototype's prototype presents this triad of different qualities of the different things a prototype does. And then as different prototypes are cited, their anchor points where they sit on that coordinate space are dropped into the thing such that they can be kind of referenced and linked to. That's something that is done non-interactively in the initial paper, or I actually can't remember. I'll have to look at the original PDF whether they do that. But what I do is I add them to the existing document such that you can see them, so that by the end it's a mess, but it's a mess that you saw built. And so one of the suggestions I have then is that if there are recurrent themes or structures that can kind of be buttressed and filled out, that you have the ability, like Astral was saying about climate change, but in more general terms, if you have a scaffold that allows somebody to see where things go, you can either go one of two ways. You can say, don't worry about whether it makes sense. Keep it messy, but sort of highlight the things as they go in. Or, and this is kind of my preferred approach, start the scaffold with the minimum structure to allow for wayfinding, and then add those points in progressively so that the totality makes sense as a representative of the communication at its conclusion, if that makes sense. And so, and sometimes people do that in PowerPoints or keynote slides where they'll have bullet points that look meaningless. They might show them up top and you're like, what do those things mean? And then when you come back to them, you're like, oh, of course, that icon means that whole section that I just watched. And so that would be one suggestion that I think is especially relevant in the context where this is a communication, where this is a letter and you have those parts and you want to tie them back. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
It makes a ton of sense. And I'm wondering, therefore, might it be useful for this particular letter, whose purpose it is to support what we're doing, and what we're doing is helping people think and communicate about the most important issues in the world, particularly climate change. That is one of our key things. Might it make sense to present the letter in the normal fashion, and then you interact with the thing, and suddenly you have a huge amount of nodes in space related to either climate change or another specific topic, where each node can give further information, it can give a citation, it can give a relationship. So it's basically a little letter with a huge knowledge graph inside it. Might we want to do that? Or might we want to include an entire 3D world to highlight something there? Are there ways we can literally make it explode with further meaning?
So the one challenge with, sorry, Mark, I want to jump in on this. The one challenge that happens when you construct a hypertext too densely is that it loses that initial authorial intent, where you say, well, maybe you want to jump out and play with this. These are things that are entertaining, but they can be somewhat distracting if they're unbounded in terms of what those detours might entail. One of the things that you may be able to do is construct kind of an itinerary for people, a list of things. So either you have those things as distractions, relatively time bounded. I feel like Bartosz Sichanowski does a good job of this with his WebGL explorations of how a watch works or how a tidal processions and things like that work. So I'll link those in a second. Or you save the actual honest to God outlinks and the really truly distracting things for the end, such that you can get people through everything. Because one of the things that is challenging, if, for example, you want to sell iPhones, which I still very much do, is that you want to get people to the point where they feel like the buy button is the next most important step. And telling people information is useful, but if you give them an unbounded kind of context to just fill their heart's desire with information about all things iPhone and Apple, then that's enriching them, but it's not moving product. So yeah, if you have an agenda, making sure that you have a clear funnel, keeping people to that and making sure that they get to the end without having to write watch to the end on every paragraph header.
Mark, do you mind if I jump on that as well? Okay, thank you. I owe you coffee, particularly for this one. So, Randall, this is the very reason that I want to have a spatial coordinate system for knowledge objects, not 3D objects, so that we can have all this, because Mark quite literally wrote the paper on what you said, the difference between spatial hypertext and hypertext for thinking versus communicating is a very different thing. Absolutely. So what I would really, really like is someone reads the document, it comes across the situation in blah, blah is blah, blah. And then you have something like a citation link, some kind of icon. You click on that and you get this massive stuff. And then you read the next sentence. If you look at it with this highlighted thing, you click on that, same stuff, and it all moves into a different position. So you can really easily have lots of different views of this information. It's like if you are new to this subject that I'm talking about, everything fades in the background except for maybe 2 or 3. That's why spatiality should be separated from the potentially huge amount of information in the node. So yes, perfect, fantastic. Mark, over to you.
Okay, a couple of quick things. The first thing I thought about when we talk about, well, let's add a knowledge graph in this. The one thing you need is an enormous thing, the button that says, "What do you want?" I mean, unless, well, I put a thing in the sidebar. Of course, there's a difference between a solicited letter or an expected letter and an unsolicited letter. And I don't just mean a flyer, but if I write applying for something or say, you should really take a look at this, that's a sort of serving suggestion. It's not clear what they want, apart from maybe I want to sell you something or I want you to, I'll use my services or something. So I think there's something to do there. The other thing I can't help but sort of bring us back to is I keep thinking about the sheer scale that's implied every time we say, well, let's add another something. And all my experience is that this is something that you can't use a machine for, and somebody has got to make sense. So if you don't have the information sufficiently organized, all these other doodads will go nowhere because they'll always end up half complete or broken, or you press a link and it goes nowhere. It's annoying. It's fiercely annoying, but that's the reality of the world we live in. And trying to pretend that it doesn't exist doesn't get us to usable products, because the moment basically you plug it into something real, it still fails. So, I mean, one of the reasons, one of the things that people say about the web is one of the reasons it works is it fails quite gracefully. Everything before required, Xanadu, it would have been one web for the whole world. It was fine, but there would have only been one, and that's not a problem per se. But the whole thing has to be built out. So I think it's worth just adding a sort of sanity check each time you think, oh, I'll add a button or I'll add a thing, decomposition for this, is to think, how would that be resourced? And is it actually useful at first contact for the person? I would warrant that in many cases they aren't. They're nice ideas, conceptually wonderful. But also the other thing we have to bear in mind is we have to be mindful of the time that the recipient has to use the letter. If we send them a letter that takes them all afternoon and a bloody great knowledge graph to know whether to say yes or no, they may have moved on to another letter by then, so we get no answer at all. So don't overlook scale.
Thank you, Mark. Jonathan.
Yeah, I was just going to make a tiny point. Several people have said worried about information overload, too much stuff popping up. If it is a bit like a knowledge graph, I was just going to say I found it very striking when you have when you're using the Z-axis. I don't know if you call it the Z-axis distance. If you have rectangles piling up in front, obviously they obscure things, but it's visually very striking, and it does in a way make use of XR. And I imagine if you move around, you would see some kind of parallax happening. And I just thought that's if that goes with the way your knowledge presentation of information is constructed, I think it would be a very fruitful way of using the space available in that direction, not just in that direction, or maybe partly. So you could have things stacking. If it's literally a case of explain this and something therefore can obscure it by putting the explanation in front, I think that's a worthwhile thing to do, if that's doable.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly don't want to send a letter that ends up being very complicated to read, for sure. We're going in between the human crafted, so to speak, text of this little thing and what it might also show beyond for different kinds of readings. I think we have stretched the conversation on a lot of different useful dimensions this week. There won't be any programming until the 12th. So if anything boils up for this that's actually implementable now, that would be interesting. Rob, 3D movies, right. That's a really interesting point. And I think that deserves a few seconds. So I've looked at all the ones that Apple have made, and they're very different degrees of worthwhileness. The latest one, the Red Bull, or whatever it's called, the skiing one, I think is by far the best, for the simple reason that it tends to keep the distance between the subject and the camera uniform. So there's a much higher feeling of a person in front of you rather than being on top of someone's head or they're tiny in the distance because of the 3D spatiality of it. I have not, Rob, enjoyed any 3D movies as movies. I think for the reasons you're thinking. However, the spatiality of having people in front of you, theater style, is really profound. Whether you don't have any lens blur effect and it's not made to be flat as a movie, but it is produced like that. And I'm wondering if that relates to something else we're talking about. I highly recommend doing the Red Bull one on the headset, Rob. You've seen it, right, Brandel?
Yeah, I really liked it. My daughter really liked it. I would add 3D movies, as seen in a social context, means that almost everybody, except for the person in the very center of the theater, has the incorrect projection. Whereas in a stereoscopic display, you get to have the only good seat in the house every time. And one of the things that's funny about that is if you watch a 3D movie with multiple people, they all look like in vision, so you can sit next to people and share. They all look like they're sitting in the wrong place, but you look like you're sitting in the wrong place to them. So it's an interesting contrivance that sort of balances the best experience with some kind of concession to social existence.
Yeah, it really is. It breaks reality in a way that seems natural. It's very powerful. I also don't use my head. I did actually invest in the Vision Pro version 2, and I feel it's exactly the same as the first. In the sense, it's what the first one feels the first few days you have it until you notice the slowness and the little things. So I think it's a really worthwhile polish. I do use it for more things, but for what we're talking about here, it seems maybe that what should be focused on is some kind of, here is a normal letter in XR. Oh, how boring. Oh, I can do a certain thing to it and I get more. Something I could normally get. So maybe that should be something as a huge map in the back of the room that, as an illustrative thing. If an academic document had that, maybe it would be useful or not. But anyway, if anyone has thoughts, you know where to send them.
Yeah, I will go through the document as if the letter is the letter as it exists in Dropbox today, then I will go through that and sort of come up with more content aware input.
Yeah, that would be great, Brandel. And I don't know if it's been slightly edited. I will email you the author version as well, so you can then export it as you see fit. In fact, I'll do that right now. That's weird. Compress. Okay, I'll put it on Dropbox to see if anyone else wanted. I'll give you the link here in a second. Benefit of
Jimmy, something that I conceptualized and built partway through a few years ago was a recipient preview of an email. One, to show what it would actually look like on the iPhone that they are very likely responding to it on, so that you can understand just how little space you have and where the line breaks are going to be. But then I took it further to put it not just on the iPhone side screen, but to put it on an iPhone, and then to have that iPhone in a world so that you could see how little attentional sort of real estate they would have likely. And then I mused, didn't do, but about putting the iPhone in a screen in a hand, walking across the street, so that you could kind of really frame up how distracted somebody is. And then run some number of reactive simulations of like where they would sort of misinterpret things. And you could use an LLM these days to have somebody kind of respond and sputter at various parts of your email in order to figure it out, to be able to essentially anticipate a stochastic distribution of what kinds of responses somebody might likely have. All of which you hate by virtue of reading the email incorrectly in certain ways. The mail team didn't go for it.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's funny how bloody difficult it is to think about this. And when we go back to the Old Testament and we look at early communications, it's really hard to find a way of how you will best use a medium when you haven't even invented the medium finally yet, right? And I'm so grateful for, yeah, we're stuck in the old paradigm, but I don't mind that so much because one of the kind of founding principles of this year is to not throw any babies out with any bathwater. So that's why I'm okay with sometimes you want, if like, Peter's background, you want to have a facsimile of a bookshelf. Why not? Sometimes you want to have it that I keep referring to two-page spread or single page or whatever it is. Sometimes you want that. Sometimes you want Brandel's magic carpet. You took one of our early meetings, took the transcript, analyzed it, made it into an actual carpet for different things. You want that. To get to that point is really hard. But in my own journey with this, just the realization that the document is actually irrelevant. As long as everything is in there in whatever form, XML or PDF or who cares, as long as it's extractable, the environment should really give you the options to interact with it how you want to. That environment, like Astral said, could be sitting by a fireplace. This is something that Mark really talked about quite a while ago, where if you're proofreading a document, you want to see it visually different from when you're writing it. Maybe not in a more proofready style, but just different to help your eyes be fresh on it. So these are important things. But if we have two choices, just for the sake of the last 60 seconds here, of embedding in this document for reading in this thing for this person, either click a button and you see the citations in space with extra information, or a medium-sized graph of the concepts presented. What do you think? Would that be useful as in demonstrating potential, or would it be just silly?
What's fastest?
I think it would be about the same. And yeah.
The eye candy of that might be good optics for using the AR, XR, VR kind of world. And it's gee whiz. I mean, in terms of information content, it's no different from like a normal 2D mind map or something like that. I mean, or they're going through author and BibTeX entries. But it certainly looks cool. And that's part of the AR's thing. I mean, if you're looking at it in a headset, man, I can go find these links a lot easier than clicking and browsing and clicking and browsing. But the thinking you got to do is the same regardless. And sometimes thinking on a browser, I mean, we're used to that now, but 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that was all new. Now it's de rigueur.
Yeah, it's a little unfair for me to say most of my emails are just that. Sometimes my email is look at my show reel, and then really my email.
Look at my blog entry, or look at this write up I just did, and tell me what you think.
And don't forget to add emojis for so there's a participation. Also told.
Emojis, but also as Keith says, icons. They are kind of icons, right? And it is interesting though. The icons you can attach to messages on the iPhone, which I think is absolutely amazing. I can't remember the name of them right now. Maybe one of you can. But now that my son at 8, he started texting, not a phone. He has an iPad, so he can't call random people. He will assign them to his own messages, like an exclamation mark to his own message. I would never have thought of that. In one way, it's probably tap back. That's right, Brendel. Thank you. Absolute genius new thing. So it's a different levels of utility to different spaces. Anyway, we will see. Next week will be the final discussion on this letter. And again, I'm extremely grateful for your brains and your time. And if you have any other thoughts about the meetings in general, because we are changing them a bit this year, please do share. And anything else?
Good luck with getting that communication through and making the connection.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Chances of it producing something useful are infinitesimal because it's got to do with America, and funding for the kind of things we're doing isn't a big thing there at the moment, apparently.
Don't underestimate the individuals there.
Oh no,
Doing
it's a structural thing. Big organizations are hamstrung, let's say so. But I find having a specific problem to attack is a lot more fruitful than having a generalized problem. So
Yeah,
that's
don't
why
try to change the paradigm. Solve a problem, and the paradigm will come with it.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I look forward to our next discussions on the more environmental stuff or whatever it is. So, yeah. I'm just looking here finally at Astral's comments. We're still operating with the understanding of technology and nature's duality. We move forward. Yeah, no, absolutely. We can't do that. We have to have a much more integrated system, no question. I mean, I certainly do not want to have headsets strapped on my face all day. It should, in my mind, it should be when you have something like a murder wall or you're doing a big thing. Most of the time, I want to be reading a paper book. So anyway, Rob, I'm not going to comment on that. And I love you all and have a good week and hope to see you on Monday. All right. Bye, everyone.
Peace, everyone.